Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is John Sullivan, the former
chair
of the New York State Democratic Party. Thanks, John. And John and I are going to discuss George Santos. So, John, what's your reaction to this whole thing?
For the last 10, 12 years, our entire political discourse has been sliding downhill. And I think we've just about hit the abyss. The recrimination, the derogatory dialogue, all of that sets the stage for someone like a George Santos to be successful. And I think essentially the monkeys are now running the zoo, because he's still there and he ought not to be. And what is the Speaker of the House of Representatives doing? Well, he got there by the hair of his chinny chin chin, and he needs Santos's vote. So he keeps giving these vague answers about, well, we'll see, and this and that. And then they turn around and throw Democrats off key committee. It's a sad, sad state of affairs. And if it continues without the public taking a position from an electoral standpoint, I'm afraid we're going to look like the last days of the Roman Republic. And McCarthy, what was it? Senator McCarthy, the fellow said to him, "Have you no decency, sir? Have you finally no decency?" Mm-hmm. I think we've got Brutus here is being portrayed as Braveheart, and that is ridiculous.
So, when did you become aware of Santos?
I think after the election, there were several Democratic seats on Long Island, 2 or 3, I think, that went to the Republicans, as well as
Patrick Maloney.
Maloney's, Sean's seat, and he was the head of the DCCC. So,
right.
And I think part of it was the Democratic candidate for governor, Kathy Hochul, who won, did not marshal enough support on Long Island, particularly in some of the suburbs, in order to counter the Republican never-ending lie and never-ending story about crime and this and that. Crime mostly. People fear crime, and I understand that. And so in those congressional districts, there was a red rash, if you will. There was a resurgence of the Republican Party, and this guy slid by. Now, that's the question. How did he slide by?
Yep. You tell me, John.
Well, I've listened to your previous guests, mm-hmm. Long Island, and they had some interesting observations. I think I told you some time ago that my thoughts are that we need to go back to the chairs in the Elks system, where people get elected on the local level. They serve as a alderman or county legislator or whatever it happens to be. Then they seek, wider office and ultimately Congress, because by then they would be vetted. You would know who they are. But when the first time you run for Congress and nothing else, celebrity, name recognition, name calling, and all of that allows somebody to hoodwink the public, and that's what happened here. Mm-hmm. We need to go back to a system where people with experience are promoted, and without it, our system is too prone to electoral gaffes. I'm always quoting Thomas Jefferson. Excuse me. People who believe they can be both free and ignorant believe that which never has been and never can be. And if we are ignorant of the political realities, goodbye republic, hello fallen empire, if you will. And that's about where we're at.
But the phenomenon of people coming out of the woodwork and vote and running for Congress has been that way for a number of years.
And it's so driven by money, and we don't know where he's coming from. So the Citizens United case, which opened the doors, the floodgates to all of this, that obviously needs to be dealt with legislatively. But here we now have a divided Congress, and one side wants to twiddle their thumbs, point fingers, and create havoc, including the failure to raise the debt limit to pay the bills that we've already acquired. That's responsible. It's so ridiculous that we are definitely in peril. I think our republic is in peril, and we are imperiled as citizens in our pocketbooks if for some reason the government fails to raise its debt limit. People like me who are on Social Security and so forth, the checks won't be coming. You'll be able to buy less. It's going to, various economists have predicted catastrophic results. So they're toying with disaster, fiddling essentially while Rome is literally burning.
Okay, let's go back to before the election. There was only one paper on Long Island. It was a weekly paper that, outlined how bad George Santos was, but none of the other papers picked it up until the New York Times did. Okay, so the other papers like Newsday and the other papers on Long Island, they were lax in their coverage of the congressional races. What do you think that is?
Well, I think it was all about Lee Zeldin. You go where the juice is flowing when you're a reporter. You want to be up on the latest activity, and so Zeldin was the one who was generating the headlines and the possibility, and it gave ink, created ink for the news reporters to use, because he came within a hair of his chinny chin chin of the governor. So all of the rest kind of fell through the cracks. And I think that it's a comment on the lack of good local journalism. When I was in my formative years, we had we still have it, local daily newspaper. It's called the Oswego Palladium Times. And my dad actually was a linotype operator for many years at that paper. He was the head of the union too. But when you picked up the Palladium Times in the evening, you would turn and open to the editorial page. Why? Because Clark Morrison, who was the editor, always had something to say. And I'll never forget one editorial about a school superintendent. The guy's name was Carnell, Dr. Carnell. The headline of the article of the editorial was, "Whoa, Dr. Carnell." Well, guess what? Dr. Carnell was gone about 2 weeks after that editorial. Now, people aren't reading newspaper editorials. Newspapers aren't writing editorials like they used to. People are getting their news from the internet, from Facebook, from TikTok, or whatever else. And we've got to reverse this dumbing down of our electoral process, or we will all be dumbfounded.
Mm-hmm. The other issue that I want to bring up is the parties, both the Democrat and the Republican parties on Long Island. They had a hand in Santos' rise in Congress, right?
Yeah, and tisk, tisk, tisk. They didn't do their job, really, both parties. failed to properly vet the candidates. And usually they do what's called opposition research. Now that can get way out of hand, but you got to know basically if somebody has got several names, did not go to the college that he says that he went to,
Right.
was apparently what was he, a go-go dancer or something? He was I don't know.
In drag.
Yeah,
In
and then,
Brazil, I believe.
and he apparently had GoFundMe accounts for one guy was a veteran. His dog
Yep.
was, and he raised something like $3,000. Never gave
Yep.
the money. I mean, hello, how bad can you get? Then I
Mhm.
was watching the news just the other night. They said even his staffers are now turning on him, the ones he could hire. One of them has accused him of sexual harassment. So I don't know. He said that he's gay. He said that he's Jewish, but he was like Jewish, kind of ishy Jewish. I don't know what that means. His parents were Holocaust survivors or something, and in fact, they're from Brazil. And I mean, the whole thing. It's a talk about a house of cards. I mean, a house of nothing, and how that could get by the local party and even the state party is beyond me. I know had I been chair of the party at that point, I believe I would have drilled down to find out what's going on here. Now, the other thing is the candidate who ran, Zimmerman, he was an incumbent. People thought, well,
No. It was an open seat because Tom Suozzi was the congressman, and he backed out to run for governor. And Robert Zimmerman was not an incumbent, and neither was George Santos.
am I thinking that Zimmerman was an incumbent, maybe in the adjacent district, and he got okay, then I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I know Tom Suozzi, and I thought he made a mistake by trying to run for governor, by the way, because Tom is actually a very talented person. He was I know him such a long time. He was a county legislator when I was a county legislator, and that's what, 30 years ago.
Okay.
So, and Tom is the kind of guy who generates press. You know, he's a nice-looking, well-spoken man, and the news people follow him. Well, by his running for governor instead of Congress, his congressional seat kind of took a back seat, literally. And but Tom should have known. Apparently, this guy ran before.
Against him.
Yeah.
In 2000.
And the people who you interviewed were saying that he was generally viewed as a kook locally. So kooks can pull the wool over people's eyes, given enough money and given a lack of appropriate reporting and solid information getting to the public. I think we started to go to hell in a handbasket when the Reagan administration repealed the Fairness Doctrine. The Fairness Doctrine used to demand that there be two sides of every story. I think we've talked about this before. If you were on the radio, and I was back in those days, you had to present both sides of an issue. But the Fairness Doctrine went out the window. And then you had people like Rush Limbaugh and I can't think of some of the other ones, but he was probably the most prominent, who just grabbed the microphone and spouted stuff to get people excited and to get up, but not really purveying information in any kind of, I mean, NPR was still there, but it wasn't as jazzy, as souped up as these talk show hosts were. So that's a diversion. Here's the other diversion. I blame Rupert Murdoch. I blame Rupert Murdoch, the New York Post, Fox Network for becoming essentially purveyors of disinformation. They choose what to report. They report it as if they're reporting the news, but in fact, they're not. They're creating news, and they are collaborating with some of the office holders, as they did with Trump. You know, what's the fellow's name who's very prominent? Hannity, I guess. You know, he coordinated Trump's people about what what the agenda was on the air. Well, that's wrong. That is wrong. It's also wrong when, let's say, MSNBC, in my view, features as a commentator someone like the Reverend Sharpton, who is an activist. Okay, so you cover his funeral dissertation, but you don't have him covering himself, and that's essentially what they have, and that's wrong. I think, when Chris Cuomo was interviewing his brother, that fell apart and finally was viewed as wrong. So journalism, where's Walter Cronkite when you need him?
Right.
Journalism has gone to hell in a handbasket to some extent too, but there are good investigative journalists who work for papers like that Long Island Weekly, who, given a wider forum, would be very effective in getting the information out. But we just don't know what to believe anymore. We don't know who to believe. We don't know what to believe. I personally put credence in like CNN, MSNBC, even though they have a bit of a slant toward the left. I put no credence in Fox News. And on the local level, some of the local channels are owned by, was it Sinclair Broadcasting?
Okay.
And they're very right-wing too.
Mm-hmm.
So we've allowed the ownership of the media to become saturated by the top 1% people who are manipulating information, going to all of the great unwashed, as they used to say. And it's not working in their favor. It's working in their favor.
How could a citizen like you and I change that? I mean, I have no authority to change the dialogue on MSNBC or CNN.
You know what's?
Yeah.
You are raising issues. You changed the name of your program. We haven't talked about that.
Right.
Or broadcasting on the internet. You're attempting to get to fill in the blanks, if you will. As I thought it was very informative. I think you had two programs with local Long Island people who in the know. You don't hear that from the networks. They should have tuned into the Cynthia Pooler show and put your clip up on the air. Maybe they still will. But, the lack of, I don't know what to call it, journalistic propriety these days is just disheartening. How do we change it? We do what you're doing. We do what I try to do. I just finished and was published, had a letter published in the Syracuse newspapers. It was called, "Are We Headed to the Abyss?" I've been using some of my comment in this discussion. I, every once in a while, get on my high horse. I try to be civil. I try to focus on issues. I try not to engage in invective and personal attacks, but I try to raise issues. And so I write. That's what I do. I write. To the extent that I can speak, like you're giving me this opportunity, I speak. But I guess I'm a voice in the wilderness, as perhaps we both are. But
right.
We got to expand our horizon and get from the wilderness to the mainstream. Now, how do you do that? How do you go viral? I don't know. I mean, I'm on Facebook. I have Twitter. Started TikTok. People are dancing for a minute or so on there. Maybe I need to do a little dance. Do a little dance, make a little. If it's wrapped in an entertainment shell, if you are amusing, then people may listen. But if you're simply doing the Walter Cronkite thing, reporting the facts, people are going to sleep because it's not exciting enough for them. It's not dramatic, I guess. And that's the trend that we are on that needs to be changed. And again, I keep coming back to what Thomas Jefferson said. I don't think anyone else has said it as well as he. And I used to write that on the board, first day of my class when I was teaching political science. I would write that on the board, and I kept going back to that, back to that, back to that. I also, what I did when my students were walking in, I had Diamond Rio country group singing the song, "You start walking your way and I start walking mine. We meet in the middle neath the old Georgia pine." And the kids would look at me like, "What? Why is this political science professor playing a country song at the beginning of class?" And I would say, "Did you listen to the words? You walk your way, I walk mine. We meet in the middle. We meet in the middle. We meet in the middle." Compromise is essential if we are to have political progress. But to have compromise, you have to have dialogue. You have to have sincere dialogue, not brickbats and invective and throwing all of the nonsense out that some of these Congress people have done. I mean, it's bad.
We talked about Long Island. We talked about the race, and George Santos fell through the cracks. He won. He got his congressional seat.
But why does he still have it? I guess that's the question. Where is
right. Now I was glued to the TV for 15 votes for speaker, and
Yeah,
ultimately he won. Right, and McCarthy won.
Yeah,
but the commentary said that because of Santos' vote, McCarthy is now speaker.
Oh.
Okay, whether or not that's true, I don't know. But now that he is speaker, what is he doing about George Santos? What is McCarthy doing about George Santos? Number one, and number two, they're from upstate. What was Elise Stefanik's role in all this?
She has transformed into the Wicked Witch of the West or East. She started out as a political operative, ran in the congressional district that I considered running in some time ago. I think I told you that story. It was 2009. And Barack Obama had just been elected, and the upstate northern part of New York State congressional district was open because John McHugh, the congressman, who's a gentleman, a Republican, was appointed Secretary of the Army. So the Democratic Party officials had the right to choose the candidate. There was no primary. I had just retired in Albany as my deputy Medicaid inspector general. I had served the entire area as an attorney general. I'd been the mayor of Oswego, which is one of the urban sites within that whole district. And I was well known throughout Watertown, even in Plattsburgh. So I thought there would be the cherry on the cake of my political career. Guess what? I was not given the nomination. Why? Because at the time, Rahm Emanuel, who was the political guru to Obama, said they did not want a Democrat to run because it was so Republican leaning a district that it would give the impression, if he or she lost, that Obama was somehow losing his grip. So they selected an independent from Plattsburgh, a guy by the name of Bill Owens. Very nice guy, an attorney. He had a couple bucks too. And he ran. Well, it was interesting because he won. Why did he win? There was a split in the Republican Party. In fact, the Republican candidate, a woman from the North Country, wound up endorsing Bill Owens because the conservative guy so upended her campaign that she, Didi Scozzafava, that was her name. So anyway, so Owens goes in for 2 terms, and then he takes his hat off and says goodbye. Do you remember what Bill Owens did in Congress? Is there
No.
anything? Okay. I don't think anyone remembers anything he did. You know why? I don't think he did much of anything. He occupied the seat. He served a political purpose. Much more than that, I don't think. So then along comes Elise Stefanik. She was, I think, an operative in the Bush administration or an intern or something from Albany, not from the district. She lived outside the district. But money allowed her to get a grip on the Republican nominating process. She won the Republican nomination. The district had been reconfigured to be more Republican. Oswego was taken out of it. I thought about maybe trying to run because it was, at least there'd be a primary. And you know what? I had said, after 40 years of rolling the rock uphill for the Democratic Party, and they couldn't give me that courtesy of a nomination, I was done. I was done. In fact, my daughter, who used to work for Congresswoman, can't think of her name right now, from Rochester, long-term Congresswoman, she said, "Dad, you wouldn't be happy in Congress. You'd have 30-year-olds telling you what to do, and you'd be on the phone half the time raising money. That's how bad it has come. Yeah, that's what it's come to." So, not that I necessarily would have won, but she won. She came across, first of all, as a reasonable person who was, kind of a mainstream Republican. But now she has embraced Trumpism. She has embraced this McCarthy. She has embraced the election deniers. And I think it's time that somebody ran against her with some gusto in that district. Now, unfortunately, I don't live in that district anymore. I live in the district that's now represented by, well, you can hear this, Claudia Tenney, Utica. And they read it so that Utica, Oswego was with Syracuse. We should have been in the Syracuse district. Goes from Utica to Oswego to Rochester, almost all the way to Buffalo. And so there was no real serious Democratic opposition to her. So we have Claudia Tenney, who, as far as I know, is another election denier. So people have to sit up, take notice, and say, who are the election deniers? And you stand up and be counted. Are you an election denier? Then I'm going to vote no. I'm voting no against anyone who doesn't believe that the 2020 election was fair, reasonable, and produced a clear result. I mean, that's the first thing. I'm going to vote against anyone who supported the insurrection in Congress. The Congress people who were complacent and compliant, even though they were being chased out of their offices. A week later, they were all, oh, well, it was just a little kerfuffle. Yeah, just a little kerfuffle, come on. And that's what Trump recently said. He thought that the policeman who shot the woman, Ashley Babbitt, I think, that he was a murderer. What? The policeman who was defending, they were bashing in the door to get into the congressional chambers. They put wood up against it and furniture. As a last resort, he used his gun. Well, McCarthy at least did say he thought he was justified. I mean, it's sad that they had to use lethal force to protect the Congress of the United States. But where did that attack come from? Down Pennsylvania Avenue. Throngs came up the avenue with the intent of doing exactly what they did do, interrupt the process of electing the president. And what did the president do? Nothing.
Okay, my question is,
what is our Justice Department doing? That's the question. I hope they're doing something, because at some point there has to be accountability. There has been none.
my question to you is, with the 4-seat majority, which is the same majority that Nancy Pelosi had, okay? Nancy Pelosi had a 4-person majority. Kevin McCarthy has a 4-person majority, but he's caving into all of the all of the demands, Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of the. Okay, my question to you is that a proven leader? How long do you think he'll last?
Not very long. He made a Faustian bargain with the devil, if you will, and the Faustian bargain is now coming back to bite him. I mean, in effect, his winning the speakership, I would say, is a Pyrrhic victory. You know what a Pyrrhic victory is? You win the battle. General Pyrrhus, I think, back in the Roman days, he won a battle. He went on to lose the war.
Yep.
So I think that McCarthy has achieved a temporary hegemony, a temporary victory, but eventually the chickens will come home to roost. Now, Nancy Pelosi had, as you said, the same edge. But you know what? She was a leader. She did not have to give in to the far extremes of her party to be elected. She made no pact with the devil. And she wooed people like Omar Ilian or whatever her name is,
Right.
and the woman from New York who's
AOC.
Yeah, who's outspoken. She wooed them to come into the fold, and they did. They did, and she could depend on their votes. McCarthy does not have that cushion. He doesn't have that surety. He's on pins and needles all the time. That is no way to try to run the railroad, because he doesn't know which way to point the engine, and the caboose is wagging the tail of the engine. I don't know about these analogies, Cynthia, but the tail is wagging the dog. The dog is barking, 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 but not doing anything that would be constructive. And so we have a mess on our hands.
Mhm.
I think just keep repeating and repeating and repeating the truth. And if we do that, eventually, I think, God willing, and the creek doesn't rise too high, the truth will out.
Okay, so we've talked about Long Island, we've talked about Washington. The saga is still unfolding, and as it unfolds, I'd like to have you back on issues that matter to add your voice to what is going on and what you think what the outcome will be.
Well, as you see, I am not without opinion.
Okay.
I try to be reserved at times about it, but it's getting to the point where we ought to be. Who was that fella in the movie shouting, I've had it and I'm not going to take it anymore?
Right.
Get that we should be shouting from the rooftops. Our democracy is in danger. What these people are doing is wrong. What we have to do is correct it. We have to listen to what is a reasonable and point of view, negotiate on issues, certainly meet in the middle. But this far extreme nonsense it's got to stop. It's got to stop. So happy to join you. Happy to join you anytime to sing my song of woe.
Okay, so you've been listening to John Sullivan. He was at one time. Do you ever hear from Judith Hope?
We're Facebook friends, but we don't speak very often.
Okay.
Hey.
Now she's from the city, right?
Oh, well, she has an apartment in the city, but she's from Suffolk County on the southern shore of Long Island, almost all the way out.
Yeah. So you've been listening to John Sullivan, who is the retired Democratic chair of the New York State Democratic Committee. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. John, I think the popcorn industry is doing pretty well these days. You have a great day.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I always enjoy talking with you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening.